Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, President and CEO of Swiss America Trading Corporation. Thank you for joining us on our most recent episode of our podcast entitled The Secret War on Cash. I have with me today my frequent co-host, Chris Agelastos. Chris, how are you this afternoon?
Doing well, thank you. Good to be here.
Well, thanks for being with us again. We've covered a lot of topics over the course of, really getting close to the first half of this year.
Yeah.
And, it seems like there is just an abundance of news, abundance of information, abundance of changes, things that are just developing really kind of rapidly when you get right down to it. Just the fact that we are sitting here at the halfway point of the year right now, and it seems like it was just a blink of an eye that we kicked off our podcast here for 2024.
Yeah.
So, as we've covered kind of the gamut of various financial and economic topics, this the first article I want to cover today, I know we were talking about a little bit before we went on, but the title says a lot. Greyerz talks about all hell is about to break loose in the world financial system. Now, if that isn't a direct statement, I don't know what is. And, as I read through this article, Chris, the more I started looking at all the different point by point that he breaks down for us, it's hard to not say, he might be onto something. He might be right.
Yeah.
And he kind of hits on all the various points. This is Egon von Greyerz, who is legendary for his predictions about the quantitative easing moves that were made. He also was, what I want to get this right, the historic moves that took place in currencies and metals. He properly predicted that. So he's got a background. He's got a track record. This isn't a guy who's just out there beating a drum for the sake of beating a drum. He definitely has some good perspective, some good insight into what's happening. And as he broke it all down, he talks about the political aspect of it, the geopolitical, the currencies, debt, what's going to happen with investment assets. Again, the whole gamut he covers. So tell us a little more about what he's alluding to here, not even alluding, what he's stating here in terms of what we might expect to see. As he puts it, all hell is about to break loose in the world financial system.
Yeah, he's basically saying, complete financial collapse. So that's not very positive. And as you were saying here, how much we've covered just since the first of the year, all these topics that are kind of picking up speed. It took me right back to in his article where he mentions that all these dominoes are starting to fall and they're picking up speed. And that's exactly what we've been reporting throughout the year. So even though the headline seems a little sensational in a way, right? When he lays out all of his points, he talks about weak leadership, not just here in the US, but internationally. He points out that 6 of the 7 G7 leaders have 60 to 70% disapproval ratings, not approval ratings, disapproval. And so he's certainly predicting social unrest going into the election year here in the US and other elections taking place globally over the next year or two. Talks about bank defaults and high interest rates, which obviously we've been covering a lot. And he does point out, which I know, but I don't hear it every day, that the world's paper currencies have lost 97 to 99% of their purchasing power, since the 70s, early 70s. So, he's just, as he lays it all out there, he essentially says, we've got 3 to 8 years before there's a likely total collapse of our currency, and that gold by that time will be many multiples in value of what it is now. So if you're talking now, we're in this $2,300 to $2,400 range. He's predicting probably anywhere from $4,000 to $6,000 in the next few years per ounce.
Yeah, it's fascinating too. As he hits on each and every one of these points, kind of as we opened up and you just mentioned in the context of this article, Chris, it's not one single thing out there that's creating this, basically this whipsaw
Yeah.
that is going to be potentially devastating to the world or global financial system. There are several things brewing, and they're all gaining momentum by the day. The
Right.
leadership part, I think, is certainly very important, because I mean those disapproval numbers were absolutely not surprising, but I would say, it's staggering to see that,
Right.
not just, it's not just, I guess us going into our election season here, everybody's already prepared for the big showdown, all the mudslinging with Biden and Trump and so on and so
Yeah.
forth. But, when you look at the confidence factor that these various countries reflected with the G7, and mind you, the 6 of the 7 were between 57 to 72% disapproval rating.
Yeah.
The best was a 40% disapproval. There's a strong lack of confidence in
Right.
countries and governments and
Mhm.
currencies. And that is something that, with the vulnerabilities that have been building, with debt, with inflationary figures, with currencies having their problem, banks, the mortgage, real estate business, some would say the overvalued stock market, all
Yeah.
these things with these vulnerabilities out there and this lack of confidence is certainly not going to bode well for it, ultimately speaking.
Right.
So, well, getting into the second article we want to look at today, I think it's an interesting one, but I think it's very relative and pertinent to the first one that we discussed.
Yeah.
And this is talking about how hundreds of thousands of Americans are going off grid
Mhm.
in anticipation of what is coming.
Yeah.
The numbers behind this too, that I found very interesting. They are using that term prepper, survivalist, prepper, that
Right.
type of thing, and that kind of has tended to carry somewhat of a negative or fringe connotation
Mhm.
to it. However, the numbers with this growing group of preppers is pretty amazing. They talk about how it's doubled in size to 20 million since the year 2017.
Yeah.
And as you kind of read through this, it's because of those lingering problems we just discussed in the earlier article
Right.
that so many people are making this switch. And a prepper is not someone who is necessarily trying to take a definitive position against the government or the establishment, which is oftentimes kind of the way people talk about it, or it's looked upon as. These are just people who, if everything hits the fan, they want to make sure that they're in a position where there's some kind of self sustainability. Well, that's a tough one to say.
Right.
So, talk a little bit more about this, Chris. I know that over the years we've talked to people. You've talked to people
Yeah.
who have kind of been of this mindset. And is this really probably a healthy thing to be doing right now?
Yeah. Well, first off, let me say, I've probably been to, I don't know, a dozen or maybe even 2 dozen prepper self-reliance type events over the last, several years. And 20 years ago, kind of like you said, it was kind of a fringe group, right? If you went to these events, it wasn't your neighbor that you were typically seeing there, right? People a little bit more extreme in their beliefs. Well, now it's just normal people. People looking for a little less dependence on the system. Because they want to insulate themselves from whatever catastrophes are around the corner. As far as we've heard a lot about hacking and cyber security issues with like our power grid, for example. Our transportation system. How our food supply is just a few days of transportation systems being shut down to the stores being empty. I don't know if you remember, but even just back at the beginning of COVID, I would go to my local grocery store and they were out of probably 80% of the food in there. The things that were left were the things that nobody really wanted. They were rationing, how much meat you could get, in a day with your purchase there. And that was, COVID was a big deal. I don't want to say that it wasn't. But it's not like our entire transportation system was shut down. right? And look at what an effect, we saw. So yeah, they're saying there's conservatively 20 million preppers, as they're calling them, in the U.S. right now. And again, it's just people realizing, hey, maybe I should have some alternative means for power. Maybe I should look more into solar power or generators. Having some food on hand, which is a great idea, even if you just have a natural disaster in your area. We're all taught keep some food in the pantry and some water on hand. And so, this is sort of escalating with all the things that we discussed in that first article. People are starting to look into off-the-grid communities, which are popping up. They mentioned one in Utah here, where this community is completely off the grid. I think it said there were a few hundred households in there, if I remember correctly. But people are just starting to realize, look, I don't want to be completely reliant on the current infrastructure and system, because we do have a lot of problems out there, and people want to get away from those problems. And then to top it all off, conventional living is just so unaffordable in a lot of ways. A lot of big cities now. I was talking to a friend the other day. She's in her mid-20s, and she's not sure, how she's going to be able to buy a house, or if they're going to be able to buy a house in the area they want to, simply because costs are so out of hand. So there's more than just one reason, but it's all of these reasons pushing people to realize they need to kind of find a way to take care of themselves and maybe find a better mousetrap, if you will. Right.
Well, and to qualify, you said preppers, they're normal people and preppers. Preppers are normal people.
Yeah.
We don't believe that.
Yeah.
Just preppers from the standpoint that, and I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think to better qualify it would be, it's not a political move that people are branching into this category of, and prepper, which is really a term for being somebody who is more self-prepared, we'll call it.
Yeah.
They're not, it may not be for strict political reasons they're doing it. As many of the of years past, the true preppers were actually taking more of a political stance. These are just people who see the proverbial handwriting on the wall and don't want to be blindsided when something tragic or dramatic happens, should it happen in our economy. So, well,
they just want
Chris.
They just want to protect their families. That's
right.
That's really what it all kind of comes down to. And when people count on the government for that, if they feel like the government's doing a good job, they don't worry so much about that. But I think, in our current situation, we're all a bit concerned.
Well, you hit on an excellent point too. Whereas a lot of households or families that are doing this, it has become somewhat of an affordability issue.
Yeah,
prices are just going out of control right now. The families are having a terrible time trying to put food on the table, pay their bills, live their retirement, etc. So they're having to try and figure out different ways, which at the end of the day is probably healthier for a lot of reasons, but
Sure.
It is very reflective of an economy that we have that is really kind of bulging to the point of where it's going to burst. So, well, we'll be hitting on that more. The first time I think we have talked about preppers actually on our podcast. So definitely we'll look forward to continuing to watch that and see. That's a number, especially that as we do continue to cover it, it'd be really interesting to see, that number go from 20 million to 25 or 30. Because I do think, that community could see exponential growth just given the state of what's going on. For those of you tuning in, if you have not contacted us to get a free copy of the report entitled The Secret War on Cash, please do so. You can visit us online at www.swissamerica.com, or you can contact us via telephone at 1-800-289-2646. Very insightful report, something that you'll get a lot of good information from, and actually may give you even some insight as to some things that you could be doing differently for the betterment of yourself, your family, and your future. Thanks for tuning in. And if you're not subscribed to this podcast, please do so, as we look forward to having some chats with you again, talking about this as well as some other things that are changing and shaping the way we live our lives each day. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.